Podcasters Roundtable, Round 72, Work-Life Podcast Balance. But first, a message from our sponsor.
In a land near Cincinnati, someone is lurking in the darkness. Silent, growing, and waiting to get out. From award-winning podcaster Daniel J. Lewis and the absolutely gorgeous Jenny Lewis. Baby. Coming New Year's Eve.
Yeah, that's right. You heard it. Daniel J. Lewis and his wife are expecting their first child. Congrats, Daniel and Jenny.
Thank you.
And this is really a perfect lead-in to today's topic, right? And it's kind of one of the reasons. I'm always looking for topics, happy to change last minute. And our new roundtabler suggested this topic a long time ago, and it all ties in so nicely. So it sounds like Daniel's going to have one heck of a New Year's. And on an also very cool note, that movie trailer voiceover was actually provided by past roundtabler Wayne Brecky. He was on round 48, and I think he has at least like 5 podcasts of his own, so no stranger to work-life podcast balance. One of those is Worlds of Wayne, and he clearly belongs behind a microphone because what a voice. That was very cool. We made him do that on the round. Check out round 48. That was a lot of fun. It's kind of up front, so you don't have to sit there the whole time. But let's meet the roundtable, starting with co-host Daddy in Training. Daniel, welcome back to the roundtable.
Thank you very much. Work-life balance, that's going to be a challenge in about 7 months or so.
Just turn it on its head and shake it. This is not dad advice, by the way. This is what you're doing to your life. Don't shake the baby. This is good training. Oh, it's going to be rough. New roundtabler, right after co-host Dave Jackson. Welcome back.
Yeah, Dave Jackson from the School of Podcasting. Ever since I heard the news about it, I've been so pumped the whole day. I'm so excited for you, Daniel. This is awesome, man. Great.
I only kind of believe that because Dave knows that this is sometimes the end. He said it himself. This is the end. Come on, Dave.
If anybody can pull it off, it'll be Daniel. It's the biggest enemy of podcasting are babies.
Mm-hmm.
So
and lawnmowers.
And lawnmowers. Yeah. Or drilling bricks, cutting bricks outside your window when you go live. But yeah, I'm not concerned, but we'll talk a little bit more about that. New roundtabler, and yes, we have a female. Could you imagine if it was just dudes talking about work-life balance and we didn't have... Emily, welcome to your first podcast. Your first podcast ever?
First podcast ever.
First roundtable.
Well, yeah, I was probably here a year ago watching you guys before putting out my first podcast ever. And I think, it sounds dorky, but I had it on my list of goals. I'm like, okay, by next year, I'm going to get on the round table. They're going to ask me a question.
That's awesome. And you've probably been on the list for like a year. I don't know if you're a 2014er or what, but it's been a while.
2015. Yeah.
Yeah. And look at that awesome backdrop. So clearly you rock by yourself, solo band there, one woman band.
Well, it turns into a band when it's my husband and my daughter down here. And, I play that little ukulele there, all those guitars. Show his little collection.
Nice.
Yeah, I know. And the drums are his too. So, yeah, when I told him I wanted to get into podcasting, he had no problem with it. It meant he got to buy a mixer and new microphones. So.
Nice. Yeah, I mean, work-life balance, you have several things right there in the same room, which a lot of podcasters, you see me, if you're seeing this video right now, I'm not in a studio yet, but I'm sitting right here basically in my dining room. So we do what we have to get the podcast out, or just, podcasting doesn't demand necessarily always being out of your house or in a crazy studio or, sound treatment. You can adjust, and we'll talk a little bit about everything from maybe gear. People like gear. We'll talk about that. But definitely, how do you balance it? So I'm curious. Let's throw it way back. And when we go way back in the day, we are obviously talking to Dave. there's something I want to approach there. But actually, I'm going to change it up real quick. Since let's start with kind of the man in the moment. Daniel, what are your initial thoughts about what do you think will change? Let's go with that. And we have people here who have kids. Emily, do you have kids?
I do. I have one daughter. Yeah.
One daughter. Okay, me too. So Daniel, what do you think's going to change?
Well, first I have to explain that I do think I'm a bit of a different situation from most other podcasters because I also have a business, and podcasting is part of that business. And so my business has its own space outside of the home. So my situation will be quite different for other people. But
one issue solved. Just one of about 550 million.
Yeah, but a big issue solved right there. Just a separate place.
Well, what I know will probably change is I'll probably have less energy, be getting less sleep. I'll be more interested to spend less time at work. Possibly.
Yeah, sometimes work can be, it's funny how work becomes the easy thing. Like if work was hard at all and what you do what you love for a living, but sometimes work is the break, is the weekend. It flips on its head because it's a lot of work. I'll tell you what, stay-at-home parent, single parents, like you are my heroes. I don't know how you accomplish it. It's brutal. It's so much work. It just never, kids they don't punch out. Right, Emily? And so, and Emily, do you work in the home or you stay at home or do you work outside?
I work full-time actually outside of the home, completely separate from podcasting, even though if you looked at my internet history at work, you wouldn't think that.
So what do you think about that? I mean, in terms of, being at home, taking care of kids versus working.
I actually was a stay-at-home mom for the first year, and I got restless. I'm one of those where I'm like, I got to get out. I'm not doing anything for me. I have to go, get back to work. And
Nice.
I couldn't wait to do it. And it sounds so bad. I was excited to go to work. I'm like, it sounds awful. Handing my daughter off like, see ya,
Yeah.
bye. I'm going to work now.
You will come across a lot of emotions that you before thought, that doesn't sound very nice. You're like, no, it's legit. Like we've been playing all weekend and I'm going to take a break at work. Go figure.
Yeah.
So Daniel, any other things just off the top of your head?
Well, I think that I do have a pretty healthy boundary in place between work and life so that stuff in life, like now having kids, won't spill over into the rest of my work too much. Like it won't prevent me from working. And that was one of the things that really inspired us to move my office out of the home instead of trying to figure out this complicated thing of building a soundproof studio, knowing that we would probably be having kids within the next couple years. Moving out of the office then means I can continue to record regardless of what noise the baby would be making. But I know that's not the case for everyone else. And so for the others, it can be, you certainly have my sympathy. I know what it's like just to try and podcast when my wife wants to vacuum. Imagine having a baby that you can't put necessarily, it's crying on a schedule.
Yeah. Stop. Hey, can you stop for like an hour? Just be quiet. Here's an iPad. iPads, I don't know. iPads do wonders, but
I want a microphone-shaped pacifier.
That would be amazing.
until someone comes by and like hits it and it knocks out a tooth and there's all these, you're like, that's this big thing sticking out of your baby's mouth. They're like, it was cute when I bought it. That's another thing. I think we could just have a whole roundtable on being a parent, but you'll try like 5 different brands of bottles and you'll figure out why Daniel he might review all the products. I almost seriously wanted to start a blog because it's like, here is all the sort of parent hacks that I found that you must know. Like these socks, you have to buy these socks because the others just fall off. I wasted how much money buying 5 different pairs of socks? So whatever, you'll figure that all out. But let's throw it way back, going back in the day with Dave Jackson. Paint a picture of what your life was like when you started podcasting. Before you injected this thing that would consume your life, you're like, I'll start a podcast. What did that look like?
Boy, that was weird. It's almost like I forget it. I would go to work, I would come home and watch TV and do nothing, hang out with family and friends and things like that on occasion. But
were you married?
I was not married at the time, And when I first started podcasting, I had just was getting ready to go back to school. And so that was one of the reasons why I started the School of Podcasting, is I needed some income, and everything I had. Yeah,
the natural choice is podcasting.
Oh,
you
yeah.
need to get some cash in the bank.
Even though everybody I say, if you're getting into podcasting, don't do it for the money. But I had read where membership sites were going to be the new big thing, which is hilarious because 10 years later they're still saying that. And I discovered podcasting, and I just thought it was so cool. And I'm like, look, if supply and demand is still in play here, then I should be able to, pay for a book or two, maybe if I was lucky with that. And so that's how I started. And it is funny because even that, at the time I was a student, so it was like, homework, podcasting. And, I can read about a subject I could care less about, but I have to know to pass a test, or I can talk about something I really love. And it was just, it's hard. It takes a lot of discipline to be able to, put down the things the things, there's things you have to do, and then there's things you want to do. And that's
but
really
things were pretty easy. You had spare time to switch, right? So the balancing act was not much until probably you decided to start another podcast, and then maybe another.
Yeah, there was that, and then I started dating, and that was a whole other thing where, it was just, and that's why most of the podcasting I did, probably the first couple of years, were literally post-midnight. Everybody else is going to bed. I was actually podcasting next to a water heater in the basement, and it never failed. There was a flush pipe right behind me, so I'd be in the middle of a podcast, and all of a sudden, whoosh, like, great, it's raining here in the studio, it sounded like. And so after midnight, everybody had already gone to bed, and I would do a lot of my podcasting that way. I was listening to Podcast Junkies, and Harry just interviewed Jason from Podcasting 101. This is a guy, he's a single dad with 5 kids, and he just basically, his audience knows that somewhere in this recording, he's going to have a kid come into the show, and he just brings them in, explains what it is, and sends them on their way. And the cool thing is, when I was listening to Harry's show, I think he said his 3-year-old came in, and that's going to be really cool when that 3-year-old's like 16, to go, listen, you made your podcasting debut on Podcast Junkies.
Oh yeah, I don't miss an opportunity to throw my daughter on microphone when we're here and she walks through the door. But usually it's the after show, and I'll let her scream in the mic and blow out your ears. But Emily, does work life podcast balance, does it just require giving up some sleep? Do you sleep normal hours, or is podcasting cutting into that?
No, I think when I first started podcasting, no, I didn't sleep. And honestly, I have no doubt that Daniel will be great at this, because having a kid is a lot like starting another podcast. It really is. You're comparing bottles like you would compare mics.
So I can get my kid into New and Noteworthy?
Exactly. When your kid is born, it's automatically in New and Noteworthy.
It is.
But for only 8 weeks, and then after that, it has to prove itself to get back into New and Noteworthy.
I'll be asking for baby reviews soon.
Exactly. Trading baby reviews. That's. But yeah, starting the podcast, it was kind of nice. I had kind of a dull time at work where I could focus on learning everything I could about podcasting and just binge listening. And then with my daughter, she's a little bit older now. I couldn't have done this when she was little, and I also have her half the week. I split custody of her with my ex-husband, with her father, and those days that I don't have her, it's just concentrated podcasting stuff. And then the days I do have her, I like being with her 100%, not really looking at my phone, not really paying attention to podcasting stuff. I have a lot of things like tweets automated to go out. And I'll check Twitter and my email a few times a day, but definitely not as often as the days I don't have her.
That's actually one of the keys for me when I was married. Is I did kind of the same thing. I had dedicated days where I would go into my office and podcast. And one of the things that I had to learn, it was hard for me, was not to check the phone, so when I was home, and when I was podcasting, because it's not, at least for me, I would lose points by checking the phone constantly and things like that. It's like, okay, you're here, but it's obviously you would rather be someplace else. So
we already slid into. I had to check out there for a second to get some packages, but we already slid into the downside. Like what goes bad?
No, Emily was talking about how she has days where she's dedicated to podcasting, And she mentioned how that way when she has days when she has her daughter, she's with her daughter 100%. And I said that's actually awesome, because that's one of the things where things get gray and can be kind of nasty.
Yeah.
Is if when you are with your family, if it's obvious that you're still would rather be podcasting, that doesn't go over well.
Yeah, I mean, I took those hours from, everyone being home to bedtime. Those slid right into family time. Like, I mean, if it was my wife and I, when we were just us together, and I guess I started podcasting right around the time that I met my wife. So if it was just us together, we're fairly we like each other because we're independent and we like to hang out, but we have our own interest, right? So she could be reading a book and I could go record a podcast. Piece of cake. Come back out of the room and continue with, grab another bottle, glass bottle, bottle of wine, whatever, glass bottle, same thing, right?
Got it.
Emily? Potato. So, it was very easy. And now, I kind of asked about sacrificing sleep. I've never been one to get a lot of sleep. I stay up late. I'm just a night owl by nature. And those hours they're reserved. And until my daughter goes to bed, who doesn't like to go to bed very early. She is a ball of energy that never stops. So podcasting begins often pretty late. Now, what you're seeing right here is basically me in the very short time when I'm off of work and the family gets home. So I slide it right in there, right? So you just carve out these little pieces, and it really is not so much a function. I'm building. I'm redoing the detached garage, which would be my studio, and they could come home and I could be in there, and it would sort of stand alone, and they could wait until I was done recording. But it is more about fitting the people in, less than it is the space, I think, and that is the big challenge.
Back when I launched the Audacity to Podcast, I was at that point engaged to be married. And I knew, well, I'm doing the Audacity to Podcast every week. I'm doing the Ramen Noodle, my comedy podcast, every week. And when I got married, it was really tough to keep that up, because it wasn't like I'd rather do one or the other, like be with my wife versus podcast. I wanted to do them both. And especially at that point, I had already decided to leave my full-time job where I was working at that time. Hadn't told them yet, but I was building the podcasting, and it was tough to come home from work, want to work on the podcast stuff and the podcast network and social media and all of that, but also want to spend time with my wife. And so one of the ways that for us that we worked it out while I was working full-time like that was some people may remember this time in my podcast where I then shifted my publishing schedule. Instead of being weekly for both podcasts, I made it bi-weekly for each podcast. So on one week, the Audacity to Podcast, on the next week, the Ramen Noodle, next week, the Audacity to Podcast, back and forth like that. And that did help with, meaning that then it wasn't one night where the entire evening I was occupied.
So this is a good question, right? This is a way you found some balance, but how did it affect the podcast?
It was tough. I thought, oh boy, this means I'll have 2 weeks to prepare instead of 1 week. But no, it was actually the other way around. I felt like the podcast suffered because it was, for me at least, and procrastination is something I can really struggle with. So for me, it was easier to procrastinate with the podcast being every 2 weeks. And with my comedy co-host, we actually joked with each other, and we totally believe this, is that it seems fewer funny things happen every 2 weeks than happen every single week. We had a harder time coming up with comedy when we had 2 weeks for life to happen.
What about the audience? What was the response? What were the numbers? Do you pay attention to numbers?
I do. I look for trends and such. And I think it was so early in the podcast that it was growing anyway. Mm-hmm. So it's not like it started tanking, but maybe the growth had slowed down. I'll actually look back at my numbers.
I have a theory about every 2 weeks, a fortnightly show like we are here at the Roundtable every 2 weeks, that being every week, as more podcasts come into the space, better podcasts, people's podcatchers or directories or apps, whatever, wherever they're getting are filling up with great content. And it can be hard. And so a daily show is really hard to keep up with. I follow a daily vlogger. He puts out, everyone knows Casey Neistat for the most part. He puts out a video, produced, edited video every day. I can't even keep up watching, let alone understand, he has a family and work, how he produces that every day. He spends 5 to 8 hours just editing that video every day without missing. And like I said, I can't keep up. So being in the feed every week, we always kind of hold that out once a week as that prime number. But, do we really know? And Daniel, you may have seen research, or Dave, I don't know. But every 2 weeks, I feel like, at least with this show, people have a chance to catch up. So, because what I think happens, you put a feed on top, you put an episode on top of another episode, and that one can just get, like, people, if they're behind, they'll just skip it. Like, I'll just, some people listen to every episode you produce, right? Or they cherry pick topics. But when it's there longer, sometimes I think some people can. So I don't know if it's better or worse for the numbers. I'm really curious about that. But Emily, when you started out your show, how did you, was it one show?
Yeah, we had one show and it was every 2 weeks. And then I got so excited. I'm like, can we do this every week?
Yeah.
We've got to do it every week.
Was the 2 week decision based on this balance, trying to balance the two? Or
Yeah,
just because?
I was worried about just how much work was going to go into it. But I mean, just like everything else, you get used to that amount of work. So you're able to, if your first podcast episode takes 8 hours to edit, you know that it's going to be less and less and less every week. So it got to the point where
I mean, which is, very forward thinking of you, because a lot of people don't understand how much work it's going to be, and they will say, hey, this is the so-and-so daily show, right? And what happens is they find out they can't keep that up. But so did you go to every week once you found out that you can handle the workload with your life?
Yeah, after I think the second time we recorded, I edited that same day. I was just so excited about it. I'm like, I can't wait 2 weeks. Can we go weekly? Let's go weekly. I'll do all the work. Don't worry about it. And
how did that feel a year later?
You know what? And it's like having a kid. You can't imagine what you did before that, because what did I do with all that free time that I'm now spent in front of the computer?
Yeah, I mean, Gary Vee talks about it all the time. Like, he's like, don't watch Game of Thrones. Like, you have the time. It's just people aren't willing to put that other stuff aside, like the TV shows that Dave was watching.
Well, that's the thing. I was sitting here thinking about, like, what did I used to do? And I watched a lot of bad television. I remember watching, who was the guy from Poison? Bret Michaels had a dating show, and there were a lot
Rock
of
of Love.
Rock of Love.
I watched it.
Yeah, a lot of bad reality TV shows that I was watching because I couldn't believe how bad it was. So I don't keep up with the Kardashians, and any TV that I actually watch now, I never, unless it's a sporting event, I rarely watch live TV. Everything's taped, so I can fast forward through the commercials, and that'll save you, 10 minutes.
Yeah,
I'm having a
we
weird.
cut the cord.
Yeah, that's a good idea. I have a weird feedback loop thing going on here. When I see Dave on camera, I see John Buchanan in the chat, and I see him on the wall right behind Dave. So it's Buchanan on loop here. It's just a shout out. Thanks, John, for joining us. And I see in the chat there. And Ryan as well. Ryan in the chat, he can probably give us lots of insights into he has a lot going on, including, I think maybe he said 5 kids or 5 jobs. I think it's 5 kids. So very busy. So people, they understand this balance.
Well, I know John Wilkerson from the Wired Homeschool was on my show once. I think he has 7 kids. It was something insane. Yeah. And he had a thing kind of like we were talking about. You had to have a dedicated day when everybody knew, don't bug daddy for a while. And then I think he even gave, like, candy if they were good or something like that. There was some sort of reward to keep everybody quiet.
See, parenting is just a series of bribes, like, and mind tricks. Like, I'm gonna be so sad when the Bugs Bunny mind tricks wear off. Like, Bugs Bunny psychology. Like, she says, "No, you don't," and I say, "Yes, you do." Yes, and she goes, "Yes, I do." I was like, I feel like a Jedi. I'm just like, "Yes, you do want to eat your peas." She's like, I do want to eat my peas. I was like, this is amazing. Pretty soon, I'm gonna be out of tricks. I mean, that's all I got. All right.
Yeah, but they're also manipulating you, because I have a light up sign that says recording, and for some reason my daughter sees it go on, and that means come downstairs and bother me, because she knows I'll just give her whatever she wants if I'm recording.
Oh, yeah.
And last week I was like, fine, just take my phone, fine, take it, whatever you want to play with.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Try to talk on the phone or to a friend and see what happens to the volume of your child's voice. Like, they want to be the star, so you just pass the microphone and say, "Here you go. Just start early. Grab your own podcast." So what have we talked about balancing, or a lot of our experience with life and family and podcasting. But what about work? I mean, we all have jobs. Daniel, and this is one reason I think, Daniel, it'll be a little different because he has his own business, which he can decide a little bit more about his own hours. Now, you may have decided when, right? But you're probably a little bit more flexible, right? So say you did need to take an hour in the day to take the baby to the doctor because there's 50 million checkups or whatever, you could do that, right? What's easier to do than if you were on the clock.
Right. Well, in a way easier, although at my former job, I could take sick time at any time.
Sure.
So
But I
could
mean,
just
it's
say,
you're at work. You know what I mean? Like,
yeah,
you know, you were in the middle. It's just, it's different. I would think it's different.
yeah. And now having my own business, I'm more attached to my work. So it is more of an internal struggle of I have to stop this thing. But then again, the only other instance I have to relate it to is there was a medical emergency once while I was in the middle of a consulting call with a client, and something was going on, and so I told the client I was a little bit distracted already, and I told him I'm sorry, we might have a medical issue here, but I think we're okay to keep going. And then when I realized no, we definitely need to cut it off. The guy was very understanding. We ended the call early. I was able to leave right then. There is that freedom that comes with it, and it was good that at that time I was at home to be able to deal with the medical issue instead of being somewhere else.
Yeah. So Emily, how often are you working on your show when you're at work? Your boss isn't watching this, right? He doesn't watch.
I know.
He or
like,
she doesn't watch the Roundtable. No.
I don't think she will. No.
And if you know what, Emily's boss, if you do watch the Roundtable, you totally get it because you're not watching the show unless you're a podcaster. So.
I know, and I've been pushing them to start a podcast. So I'm basically, if they do start a podcast, I'll just say I was working.
There you
So
go.
it'll work out.
So let's talk about that bleed. Does it ever bleed over? I mean, people surf the web, right? It's no different than having a hobby.
Yeah, it's I get an hour for lunch, and most people don't realize that I'm on lunch because I'm still on the computer usually, but it's podcast related. So if they see me looking at big websites of wine and cheese and stuff, they know I'm not doing actual work and I'm on my lunch break and not to bother me. But I think I finally got out of that habit of getting an idea for the podcast and saying, okay, I'm going to just spend 5 minutes on it and then go back to what I'm working on. And I realized that doesn't work for me because I want to finish it. I want to brainstorm whatever idea I have. So I end up just having scraps of paper everywhere just with lists of ideas, and then I throw them in my purse at the end of the day. And I go home and look at them, and then I can really focus on them without worrying who's walking behind me, what's on my screen.
Yeah. My first show was started while I was working in like a produce department in a grocery store, and all my notes, I would have thoughts all day long, especially in the beginning, right? You were just going crazy.
Yeah.
And I come home at the end of the day, I've told this story before, and I just pull out pieces of cardboard because I'm cutting open boxes with vegetables and fruit, and I'm writing cardboard. So you picture this, I got one earbud in, just like I'm showing you right now.
Yep.
Dave is
Yeah,
piped
that's what I
into
do.
this ear. Right, and I'm looking out for the boss because I've already been in trouble once for wearing earbuds on the floor. Thanks, Dave. And I'm writing notes. So there is that spillover, and especially in the beginning, like I said, you're so passionate. I mean, you started a podcast because you probably really had something to say, or at least you're talking about something you really enjoy. So it's hard to turn it off when you're at work.
Yeah. And that's where the best ideas come. They either come when you're in the shower or when you're at work and you can't work on it. And that's the worst.
Definitely.
So you just have to write it down.
Dave, now podcasting is your job as well. So you have a blend, but you don't get to work on your own stuff. See, this is where I think it differs from Daniel, because Daniel, your show is part of your job now, right?
Right.
Right.
Yeah,
It blends
all of
in
my
your
shows,
business.
really.
Yeah.
Especially the Audacity to podcast. Yeah.
Much different, Daniel. But I mean, on some levels, who knows? Maybe that's never getting a break. Maybe there's a difference there. Maybe taking some forced time off is nice.
The thing I like about it is I get topics for my show now when I see what people are doing, or in some cases I'm like, I should reach out to them and see if they want to be a guest, kind of stuff.
Yeah.
That's what's kind of nice about it at this point. I'm getting a much wider range of topics. That's the other thing. People are like, what?
Dave, we know your coworkers are in the chat room.
Yes, so that's right. And but no, actually, and that's the cool thing about Lipson is my awesome coworkers that are in the chat room.
Way to ham it up. Hey, Emily,
Yeah.
I don't think in the beginning we got your podcast in there. So what is your show?
It is Classy Little Podcast where we have wine and cheese every week and we pick a different topic and find out trivia and the history about it. So,
Nice. And so did you depict your show based on your life at all, right? Did you blend the two to sort of, maybe not to intentionally cut down how much it cuts between, but...
it was basically the stuff that I was doing at work because I work for a puzzle company. I edit crossword puzzles all day. So I would constantly have to look up information to make sure that this clue is right. And I'd get sucked into these rabbit holes on Wikipedia. And I'm like, I have all this knowledge and nothing to do with it.
Nice.
Absolutely nothing. So, and I would tell my friend who's now my co-host these stories of I learned this at work. And he's like, oh, and I read this great article about that topic too. And I'm like, no, I think this is interesting enough to be a podcast. Like, I'm sure many other people have said, like, we should make a podcast about this. Yeah.
I think we probably all have told other people you should make a podcast about
Yeah.
that. Like, we're probably the annoying people at the party who's like, have you ever thought about having a podcast? Every idea is like, that could be a show.
I haven't been invited to a single wedding this year now that I think about it. So
Don't invite Emily. She'll just try to get you to start a podcast.
I know, or I'll take your phone and sign you up for mine.
Nice.
To answer the question you asked earlier about did it affect my subscribers at all
Yes.
when I went on bi-weekly or fortnightly, I can't see any downward trend. For the Audacity to podcast, it was early enough. It was in March or so, 2011, that I went to bi-weekly, and I'd already skipped several weeks due to other things going on. And surprisingly, the numbers didn't go down. Same thing for the ramen noodle. It didn't go down. Maybe it hurt the upward growth. Maybe I could have had a higher upward growth. But I think we were still consistent. So I don't think bi-weekly was enough for a growing show to really hurt it.
Do you recall any feedback?
No.
Yeah.
Did you announce it
Yeah,
to
we
folks? Yeah, I thought so. So that's another thing that helps, as opposed to just where did he go? You know, when you tell people, I forget what podcast I was listening to. Mike Dell said he's taking a small hiatus over the summer. So when you know that, then it's not like, well, did he die? Did he hit by a bus or whatever? Ice-T is doing something with his podcast, and he's going to do reruns over the summer. So I think if you announce it, that'll lessen the effect of your audience walking away.
Well, the question is, these days, how much do you think people even know your schedule? Now, I know you have the hardcore, right? You've got the 100, 500,000 people who are really engaged with your show. But in general, and you can look at your own experience, I know I have a lot of podcasts in my podcatcher, less than I do when I started, but I don't even know when they come out. It's just like, is there a new one? Cool. And if there's not, there's always a new one. So I don't even pay attention to the schedule in my personal consumption habits. But, you know, we might have a skewed view. But, you know, Emily, do you think that most of your audience, now it's hard because there is the engaged minority, I would say.
Yeah.
So it sort of skews your perception of it. But do you think most people know your schedule? Are you consistent?
Yeah, we try to come out. We've come out every Wednesday, other than a break we took in December, which we told our audience about. And a few weeks ago when I was sick and I put out the episode Thursday, and I warned people on social media, you know, it's coming out Thursday. And, you know, I don't know if they're as concerned about the day and the time I come out, but I do know that people do listen as soon as it comes out, because the one time I put out audio, I put out the episode and I forgot to go from stereo to mono, and people were hearing me in one ear and my co-host James in the other. That's when I heard from listeners I didn't know I had. And they're like, what's wrong with your audio this week? And I'm like, who are you? Thank you. And I went home on my lunch break to fix it, to put it back up, because it was 4 people. And I'm like, I've never even heard of you before, but thank you.
I think mistakes sometimes can be a great way to pull out, extract that audience that will not engage with you otherwise.
Or controversy.
There's these little tools like make a mistake on purpose, see who else is listening to you. Like a chance to say hi. You're like, well, thank you very much and hello.
Yeah.
Now, Dave, I know you're all about people know that the School of Podcasting's out on Monday and Earl is commuting to his work, and so you need to be there on that time. But do you think the majority of your audience would care if it was shifted a day or two?
I would care, Dave. This is a threat.
Do it.
I would care.
The engaged minority over here.
I don't think the majority of them. If you look at the stats, yeah, everybody has that big spike on day one, and then day two, not so much, But yeah, I think it would. Yeah, I'll have to test it sometime and just have it come out on Tuesday and see how many.
No. She has built you into.
Well,
her
that's
life.
it, and that's the key to that is people. You then become part of their routine, which is kind of fun. But
I don't know the schedule for some of the podcasts I listen to unless the podcasters say it.
Right.
But what I do know is the order of podcasts. It's not something I could even recite to you. But like when one podcast is ending and the theme song is ending, I just kind of know what theme song is going next because the podcast then, as long as they're consistent, they're playing through in a certain order. So then if an episode is missing or they're a day late or something, it skips. And I realized, wait a minute, there's something missing. I can't remember what it is, but I think I usually hear this podcast right after this one.
Let's flip the work-life podcast balance over from producer to consumer. How do you work podcast in your life? Have you had to cut shows? Do you add shows? Where do you listen to podcasts? For me, it's I go to bed, I got an earbud in. Sometimes it's at my desk if it's just busy work, right? I have the ability to do that because I work at home.
That's my problem is I had a job where I had about a half-hour drive to and a half hour from work. So I had an hour a day to listen to podcasts. I couldn't listen to podcasts during the day because I was teaching. And so I'm thinking, cool, I work from home now, and I'm going to be sitting here answering tickets, listening to podcasts. I can't do it. I have to think about, I'm troubleshooting, things like that. So it really requires my attention. And I have no commute to work. So I'm in the process of, I think I'm going to thin the herd on some of these because I listen to like every podcast about podcasting, mainly to make sure nothing gets by me, but I'm finding that in most cases it's stuff that I hear from you guys. So it's
They're just all quoting Dave Jackson. Dave Jackson said this.
Are they quoting or are they just stealing?
This week is Dave Jackson.
So yeah, it is kind of weird. So now I have there's a list in Overcast called Top Shelf. And it's the ones that I want to listen to first. So,
cool, Emily. How do you work podcast consumption into your life?
I have a nice long commute in the morning. It's at least an hour from where I am, and it's really traffic. It's maybe 15 minutes if it's not early in the morning or late in the afternoon. But I have about an hour commute. And I have my podcasts, and it's funny, if Dave Jackson is done a little bit early, I have really nothing else to listen to on Monday, and I just drive the rest away in silence, like, what do I do? But
because you wouldn't dare press that radio button in the car.
It doesn't work. My radio button doesn't even work. That's why I got so into podcasts. My husband put in the Bluetooth stereo so that I could listen to podcasts, never connected the radio back, so I'm stuck with podcasts. Sorry, everyone.
Bummer.
I know. Yeah, but also at work I can listen to them fairly regularly if I don't really have to focus. There is a lot of office work that I do that is kind of, I don't need the full capacity of my brain for that. So I can listen to podcasts. Like I make sure Mondays at 2 p.m. I'm on my computer so I can watch Daniel and the Audacity to Podcast live. But it's nice because if I do have something that comes up that I do have to focus on, I know it'll come out the next day on my podcatcher on iTunes, and I'll be all set. And also, I think listening to podcasts at 1.5 speed or 2 times, I probably get so many more podcasts now, which is great because I can just cram them all in.
I can't do that. I'm old school. I listen at 1x. I just can't do it. It drives me crazy. But I do get less. I do consume less. So, Daniel, what about you?
For me, when I switched to Overcast, I was able to consume more podcasts because not only can Overcast do 2.25x, whereas the podcast app on iOS can only do 2x speed, Overcast also has smart speed, so I listen at 2.25x and smart speed, which sometimes I look at the numbers and sometimes it gets as fast as 3 times speed, depending on the podcast. But that helps me get through the content faster. I now kind of wish there was a 3x because I think I'm ready. I think I've graduated.
I'm ready to graduate to 3 times
Oh, man.
the speed.
It depends on, yeah.
Depends on the time of the day. I know when I wake up and first hit play, my brain's not ready to go 2.5 times. But by lunchtime, I'm with you. I'm on my lunch. I'm laughing. I'm looking at this. According to Overcast, I have saved an extra 61 hours by listening at 2 point whatever X.
Oh,
Did they track that?
Yeah, they gamified it like a
No.
Fitbit.
Yeah.
That's
Let me look.
amazing.
Yeah, I'm gonna look inside mine too. If
Wait,
you
so
go
do you
into your
listen?
settings,
You end up listening more so that you can save more, but you're actually losing
Yeah.
time because you're listening more? Like it's a big circle of consumption.
time travel.
Yeah.
Well,
So
to answer
ahead.
your question though, for me, now that I have a commute to my office, which is about a 15-minute commute, that gives me more time to listen to podcasts. And mowing the yard, doing housework and such, I'll listen to the podcast. Sometimes my wife will be doing something else. I'll be doing something else. So I'll just let her know, hey, I'm listening to a podcast or an audiobook or something. So if you need me, make sure you get my attention. Don't just start talking to me. Get my attention first.
I've had my wife flip on the light, like, because I'll be literally like plugged in the Matrix with big headphones on. But usually it's like Pandora though. That's in the middle of the night, and the light. And if she just starts talking, it could scare the heck out of me. First of all, but
Yeah. Yeah,
You-
absolutely.
so we went way back. What about right now in terms of how is podcasting fitting into your life, and do you need to make any adjustments, or have you dialed it in? Is podcasting really, if you fit it in, Daniel's about to just turn over the apple cart. Like let's just kick it over. But
Well, one of the things for me, but the podcast is part of my business and I run this business. So my mind is always going with ideas. And a lot of times I'll get an idea or an inspiration and I want to start working on something or write down a script or do some research or tweak something on my website, whatever. What really helps me, and I learned this from David Allen's book, Getting Things Done, is have a system for capturing these things from my mind. Get them off my mind, capture them somehow. For me, that's Evernote. For others, it might be a pad of paper or something, but just something so I can get it out of my mind and then refocus on where I am. So sometimes, like, I'll be sitting in church during a sermon and just something the pastor says or just my mind momentarily wanders and I get an inspiration for, oh, hey, this would make a great episode topic, or this would make a great number 3 of my list of items. So I'll just quickly launch Evernote, type in that note, close it. I'm ready to refocus on where I am. So getting it out of my head allows me to not have to process it right then, but then capture it so I don't forget it and then refocus on what I need to.
yeah, thank goodness for apps, and because you're gonna be a pro at doing things with one hand, right? A little harder to do pen and pad. But you have the baby in one hand. You're gonna be up for like in the middle of the night, a crazy hour, with plenty of time to brainstorm. But you might be a little zombie brained when you're gonna open the app the next day and be like, what was I writing? This is, and what is on my phone?
I would not be surprised if photos emerge of me with the baby at midnight with one earbud in my ear and the other earbud in the baby's ear. We're both listening to a podcast.
Yeah, just get it in there early. Why not, right? So, Emily, what about you? Have you settled? Are you in a good place, or you still think you need some type of shifting to make things fit in your work-life balance?
I think I'm good, and a lot of people say this, but you learn to say no to certain things. You want to help
Have
everybody
to.
out, but there are days my show comes out on Wednesdays. I know that Tuesdays, if someone tries to make a plan with me, I'm probably going to say no for now, but I'll let you know. And being able to put those boundaries on my time really helps out and get everything. There are certain days for podcasting and focusing on that. And like Daniel said, make sure you have somewhere to throw an idea you have, either in Evernote, a scrap piece of paper. Even, as much as everyone complains, Siri does a good job of saying, hey, remind me of this when I get home. And it works out really well.
Yeah, and I feel you. I mean, for me, this year has been, I called it the year of no. So I'm trying because it's just all of us, we're, by virtue of being a podcaster, you're a creative. So you're always thinking of things. You have ideas and you probably want to do extra projects. So there's always a new idea, or there's, if you do this long enough, if you put yourself out there, you have requests for interviews, or there's conferences to go to. So I'm trying to say no to almost everything because I'm actually struggling right now, I would say, with I mean, my daughter is 4 years old, and I feel like I'm still rebalancing that life, right? And you have the stuff, because I had the podcast before she got here, kind of where you're at, Daniel, and priorities change, schedules certainly change. So I'm pretty well dialed in, but sometimes maybe a show has to go. I mean, one of my shorter shows kind of went out the window, and the plan is to bring it back, but still myself, I feel like I'm still working on that balance. And I may change the format of something like the podcast or studio to make it more often. It's just not enough, right, Dave? What about you?
Well, I've done that in the past where I think at my most insane, I think I had 5 podcasts going at once. It was just nuts. And when I went back to school, all those shows got shorter. Instead of canceling them out, they just all got shorter. And the other thing is, I think that we battle as podcasters. I think we're all fairly creative, and so we're just idea people. And I had a spell here a little while ago where I got divorced, so I didn't have to worry about the family time. There was no more family, basically. And then on top of it, I lost my job. So I had nothing to do and nobody in my way. Should have been the most productive 2 weeks ever in my life, and it was the direct opposite.
Except those are 2 of the most brutal weeks of your life.
Right.
See, my marriage gone, job gone, let's celebrate on microphone. No.
Right. But just the fact that I had all this time, and instead I would let's do a little, because I didn't have to focus. I was like, well, I've got all the time in the world. I'll do a little bit of this. I'll do a little bit of that, a little bit of that, and I looked up and I was like, I'm not getting anything done.
Yep. I feel you.
You still need that discipline. So I'm actually doing that now. I actually had some things I got done this week, and on Sunday night, I'm like, okay, on Monday, I'm recording this tutorial. On Wednesday, I'm doing this. Thursday is the Roundtable, and that means Tuesday is family night, and Sunday is the picnic. Okay, good.
Yeah, and I think Daniel might be, alluding to a little bit of that when he talked about being bi-weekly and things were not as funny when it was gone every 2 weeks. Being forced into a schedule, even if it's a tighter schedule, kind of just forces you to be more creative. Or, the athlete who's, down to the 7th game and they have to step up and perform. So you kind of, and sometimes in a tight situation, you step up, right? And you might find the content or be inspired easier than when you have all the time in the world. And it's just like, you get that block. It's just too much. I can't figure out what to do.
It's more front of mind when you're podcasting more frequently.
That's true.
Yeah.
Cool. Well, does anyone else, you guys, anything else? Obviously, this is a topic we could probably go on for
I think
a lot more.
Big key to trying to work out this balance, whether it be work and podcast or family and podcast and whatever, communicate. I think, for my wife and I, we struggled for I don't know how many months of she wanted to vacuum, she wanted to do laundry, she wanted to do certain things around the house, noisy things, and I wanted to podcast and have interviews or consulting or that kind of stuff. And it was this tough thing of trying to do the 2 things together. And I have to say, hey, can you stop making noise? I'm trying to record a podcast. But we communicated and we figured out what could work, a schedule or a certain buffer of warning before certain things or whatever it is. But communication is key when other people are involved.
You're about to face the biggest communication challenge of your life. They don't speak English. They certainly don't have reason. There's no logic. I mean, it's so funny because I remember thinking, man, I cannot wait till you can understand what I'm saying. I can understand what's going on with you. You can tell me what's wrong. And now we're at an age, well, it's pretty 4.5. She's pretty reasonable and logical for a 4.5-year-old. But, 2, there's just no, the arguments, it's just coming out of your mouth, but nothing is landing. Nothing. It just doesn't matter. Right, Emily?
Yeah, there's an analogy that until they're 5, they're basically little drunk people. And
they're so drunk.
It's just, they're stumbling around. You can't, they're slurring. They're yelling at you for no reason.
They would be arrested in the streets any other time. Take them away. We put you behind bars when you act like that.
I know, but yet my 5-year-old still gets away with it, and I'm like, I want to get to your level. That's not fair. Somebody carry me to bed.
Oh, seriously. Rub daddy's back and let me go to sleep and you stay.
I know.
All right. Well, hey, I'm going to wrap it up. Let us know where we can find your show. This has been a lot of fun. Alicia Scott in the chat, thanks so much for joining us. She said she was so excited to attend live, and I know not everyone can always be here, so we are excited when you get here too. And don't forget, podcastersroundtable.com/guest. You can sign up, and eventually you'll get on the show, but it's hard. And I'm so glad we got Emily on. And Emily, she is part of the super engaged minority, so we love her because she's like, we can count on Emily being there, and you can hear she has great experience to share. So follow her, learn from her. Emily, any last words, or just let us know where to find your show? And thanks for being on your first roundtable.
Thanks for having me. This has been so much fun. One more piece of advice I'll give, and it's one of my favorite parenting analogies, and you'll hear it a lot, is if you've ever been on an airplane and you're getting the instructions from the flight attendant and they talk about the oxygen mask to use in case of emergency, they'll tell you to put yours on first before assisting your child or anybody else, because if you're running out of oxygen, you're not going to be very effective. So that goes hand in hand with anything parenting, anything podcasting, anything work related. If you're not taken care of, if you're not putting in those few hours of sleep, even though if your child's napping, you're going to want to, oh, good, I can get this, and this done. Just take a nap sometimes instead. Yeah. And you can find me at classylittlepodcast.com. Everything is there on social media, how to subscribe. Everything's on my website, just like you guys taught me.
Awesome. Yes. See, that's one of the benefits. You can send people to one place. They can get all your stuff, and you get to make all the decisions what happens there. So again, thank you so much, and so stoked to get you on here finally and spoken like a true wise parent, right? Yeah. They say
the wise parent who's drinking while my daughter's at her grandparents, like, I'm great. This is wonderful.
Parenthood could, doesn't hurt to have a little wine. Hashtag parenting. Daniel J. Lewis, as always, thank you.
Thank you. I'm from the Audacity to Podcast, but instead of plugging my own website, I want to say, go check out worldsofwayne.com. That's Wayne Brecky. He's the guy who did the voice for my little promo, and he has that amazing voice. That's not his normal voice, but check him out. Subscribe to his podcast. Hire him to do awesome voiceover for you. worldsofwayne.com. I'm Daniel J. Lewis. Thanks.
Awesome. And congrats again, and we will see you on the next round. Dave, you too. We'll welcome you back. But until then, where can we find all your stuff?
Well, you can find me at schoolofpodcasting.com. I think my last words, I want to piggyback on Daniel's thing about communicate, because you're probably thinking that your family or spouse or whoever, they want all of your time. They don't want me to podcast at all. And that's really what I thought for a while. And when I finally worked with my wife, and she said, no, why don't you do that, like, I don't know, 2 or 3 nights a week, and then I'll take the rest. And it was like, because I really thought she wanted, like, no podcasting at all. So with that open communication, it may not be as quite a combative atmosphere as you think. So, yeah, find me over at the schoolofpodcasting.com.
Awesome. More great wisdom. Oh, go ahead.
I forgot one more thing.
Yes.
Daniel, your voice has put my daughter to sleep at least 2 times. not because of the content. It's the voice. And I told him once, he was on late one night, I think it was on Blab, and I'm like, my daughter won't go to sleep. This is why I'm up so late. 5 minutes after Daniel starts talking, she's like, oh. So you have that going for you, Daniel.
Maybe the first person to say that.
Yeah. Well, he switched microphones too, so he may have just ruined it all, but probably not. It's probably still his voice, and that's a great microphone. But, here's how it'll go. It's going to put every kid to sleep except your own.
That's true.
No, but hopefully it does translate. Man, I hope you get a good sleeper. That's really the key to parenting and having a good experience. If those kids sleep, it's glorious. But good luck. We will obviously be following your journey, and we'll get to see how it's going. But you're going to do great. You guys are going to rock it, and no concerns about podcasts coming out of the ramen noodle studio. I don't know. What is Noodle? Noodle Network. Mix. Noodle Mix. Yeah. Oh, yeah, there you go.
But keep an eye out for something absolutely crazy that we're going to do now that we've announced the pregnancy.
It's
He's going to name the child Noodle.
Audio bait. Noodle.mx. Lewis. All right, you guys. Podcasters Roundtable 73. See you next time. Wave goodbye.